Welcome to Harbourside Chats with the Governor for 2026. These are discussions that the central bank convenes with important stakeholders discussing the economy, the financial sector, and things that matter for the Bahamian public. Hello, I'm Governor John Rolle, and welcome to part 2 of our conversation. We are discussing the issue of financial inclusion on the backdrop of some of the recent work that the central bank has been doing to scope and introduce a basic banking account facility for individuals. And it is recognizing the challenges for various reasons that people have in accessing banking and financial transactions in general through the formal channels, whether it's for convenience, cost, or the process itself of getting onboarded. Let's start with you, Mr. Archer, to the issue on technology. You in the banking sector also get compared to the speed at which you are moving relative to how people see technology being adopted and applied elsewhere. And so help us to understand how to look at how technology is being adopted locally versus in your counterpart organizations internationally. What's the framework that explains the difference?
So I think we have been through multiple shocks within our region. I know, when we look and we see the technology being used in our markets versus some of the more mature markets, the comparison is sometimes not favorable. But every piece of technology we use, we have to be able to pay for. And within our region, we have been through the 2008 financial crisis. We've had multiple hurricanes hit our region. And in addition to that, we've had COVID. That has impacted a number of banks across the region, where you would have seen expenses growing at a faster rate than our revenues. We had to go through a period of consolidation and restructure and to ensure that we were putting ourselves on a more sustainable path. That kind of slowed our ability as an industry to invest in technology. I would say a lot of that consolidation has occurred, still work to be done, but we're at the stage now where we can accelerate our investment in technology. And we just spoke about COVID. COVID, I would say, kind of more or less accelerated because it forced us to find ways to serve clients at a lower cost, at a more sustainable cost. And what we saw during the process of COVID was maybe around 70% of our clients were using our technology and using our digital platforms. As of today's date, 98% of our transactions are done outside of the branch. So pre-COVID, around 70% done outside of the branch. Post-COVID, 98% being done outside of the branch. That means that the adoption rate for our technology has really improved. Now, we still have some work to be done, and we still have a lot more investment to do, but the reality is we're seeing clients benefiting from the use of technology. And so the usage becomes very important, because if we spend $1 on technology, we want to make sure that we are recovering that dollar, knowing that our clients are using it. So as I said, COVID has given us the confidence that our clients actually do demand that convenience and that they're leveraging that convenience. So we're continuing to accelerate the pace at which we invest in technology. And the other thing is the client experience. Now we have thousands and thousands of clients. Our client base has expanded, and each client has unique and more complex needs. For us to be able to serve those needs, we can't do it just in the branch. The branch component is extremely expensive to do all of those services, which is one of the reasons we've invested to do transactions, whether it's at the point of sale, mobile app, at the ATM. Those channels are a lot cheaper, allowing us to focus on the more complex conversations when we're engaging our clients.
Thank you. So, Mr. Aubry, I want to come back to you, because I think we hinted at this in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of speed. And so the question is whether things like data, Wi-Fi, cellular, etc., should be considered a public good when you start to think about how we use those in financial services. And are there examples? And well, let me explain what I mean by public good, meaning that in some cases people should have access to these regardless of the cost and at no cost to themselves, depending on what they're doing. And the investment should be made by the right stakeholders. Are there examples from other countries that the Bahamas might be looking at to see how this could work?
Sure. I mean, but there's also, and this is always the case, it's happening here in the Bahamas. It's usually just happening in small spaces. So access to technology on a wider stretch, at a more accessible point, we're putting Wi-Fi in our parks. More places are doing that. You know, we go to the various cafes or restaurants, and all of a sudden there's your Wi-Fi, and we're seeing people find those spaces and access. And I think as we move into this digital norm, which is really it is, we have to create that as an equity point. One of the struggles that we see across the islands is that conditions are not equal. Folks in some of our islands are now struggling with the basic utilities and having access to those things, or if their particular island was hit by a hurricane or a large storm, they're struggling at a point that's not fair to what the rest of the archipelago is dealing with. And we have to balance that out and understand that does create an obstacle. An obstacle that is very real, but also contributes to that past maybe skepticism or perception. And so as we look at this, I think it's going to be crucial. But I also think we have to think about almost deconstructing some of these components of what it means to be a part of our communities, being a functional part of our communities, and help folks to understand that as well. And so it builds that mutual social contract I talked about, that everyone has a role, but they also have a responsibility. So that as information comes forward, we've got to teach folks in our communities that this information can be your lifeline to being more resilient, being more successful, being more thriving. And the investment in that way also has to be an emphasis from our stakeholders and from all of us in what we're doing to build our local economic opportunities, as well as, you know, you hear a lot of newspaper things about big developments that come in or anchor projects. The truth is, when we've seen external shocks like COVID or Dorian, it's the local economy that becomes most valuable.
So let's have a bit of a conversation on the so-called basic banking framework. In some countries around the world, they call it basic transactional account, because basically you're getting at the fact that people need these facilities to do basic business transactions, whether it's buying groceries, paying for transport, and the like. As we are conceiving it for the Bahamas, it's focused on ensuring that someone who might be at the minimum wage level can access a facility. So they're not a senior citizen who might already have that type of privilege today, or a student that has a low-cost account, but a low-wage earner with protections against monthly fees, some assurances around how quickly they can get the account set up, as well as the ease of establishing an account without having to come up with some minimum deposit hurdle. So all of those tie in, as well as the digital capabilities, recognizing that you increasingly need to make payments or receive payments electronically. So I want to start with you, Mr. Archer. I think maybe you've preempted us to some extent, but what do you see, if any, as challenges with implementing such a concept as a banker?
So I think, as I shared earlier, as an industry, we were facing a period where our expenses increased significantly, whether it was through provisions for credit losses, or just the general nature of inflation impacting us. And we have had, as an industry, again, to look at our entire suite of services and ensure that we are properly pricing each service. So when I look at 10, 15 years ago and where interest rates were on loans, they were double digit. Right now, interest rates on loans are single digits. So at double digits, you were able to subsidize a lot of the services that you're providing. Now you're at single digits and loan growth within the economy is not as robust as we would like. What you're finding is that you have to ensure that you're able to price your services to recover your costs. When I think about the services we offer in branch, those costs are extremely significant compared to a transaction that's done at the alternate channel. So ensuring that those basic banking services are done at a cheaper channel becomes extremely important. We have around 80 ATMs here in New Providence. Those 80 ATMs cost us on an annual basis less than $1 million to service. We have 8 ATMs on the Family Islands, and those 8 ATMs cost us more than $1 million to service on an annual basis. So you realize that servicing ATMs on the Family Islands really is not a sustainable venture. We believe if we can get agency banking in our market, it would allow us to have multiple merchants have access to a point of sale machine and circulate cash within that economy. Because part of the challenge that we have is that we're moving cash from New Providence to Family Island. The cash is then placed with someone who then has to put it to a bank, then it's flown back to New Providence, and that's extremely expensive. And then you may say, well, then there's a need for a branch in the Family Island. But when we did have branches there, those branches did not have sufficient economic activity to be viable. So that's part of the challenge that we're facing as an industry. So we need to find solutions that are sustainable in nature. So I think I would say that that's kind of the journey that we're on. The reality is finding a vendor to facilitate this has been a challenge because we need to have one that we trust and one that has experience in this area. I feel within the last 6 months or so, we're beginning to make progress. I'm hopeful about where we will end, but it will take us a while to get there. We want to make sure that when we do it right, so that we can scale it across all of the islands. So not just 1 or 2 islands, but you can have a means of accessing financial services on all of the islands of the Bahamas.
No, thank you. I think we sometimes forget that in the Bahamas, it's 400,000 people spread over, more than a dozen islands. And so the cost of providing certain facilities and infrastructure is quite steep in a lot of these cases. For you, Ms. Maynard, I want to talk about the concept of basic banking and more people potentially being connected. And how do you see that as addressing any challenges relative to businesses that might be presently operating more heavily in cash, or people, employees who might potentially be more leaning towards cash? Maybe for you this is a backward-looking perspective. I don't know.
Well, I can honestly tell you that, like I said, once we made the decision to move towards to be more digital, we definitely had challenges with some of our vendors. They were not comfortable with not coming and picking up a check because we were paying for checks before that. And so when we told them this is going to be your last check, so we need you to give us your banking information because we're going to send you the money. Getting them acclimatized to understanding that they need to check their account to make sure the money's there, or that we can email the confirmation that we sent it. I would say that it was a learning curve on both sides, for us and for them, because we need to listen well enough to understand what their hesitancy was, what their challenges were, and if we could meet their needs, because this was a valued vendor. And we also needed to get them to understand that it's not going to hurt you. We promise. It's not going to bite. You're going to be okay. You're going to get your money. You've worked with us for almost 20, 30 years, and we have been able to pay you on time. So you're still going to be paid on time. In actual fact, you probably get paid faster because your check now doesn't have to clear. Your money goes to your bank account and you get it in a couple of hours. And so I would say that transition for us took probably 3 years out of COVID. So I would say that now all of our vendors are on board because we are moving them towards B2B.
Back to one of Ms. Aubry's earlier comments, which I think is very problematic, is that some people just don't feel comfortable giving out their banking information.
Correct.
And if you're transitioning where you're making all of your payments electronically, you also run the risk in some cases of losing certain business relationships because people don't want to disclose that, which is not a good thing.
But interesting to that example is that's a trusted relationship, and that adoption still took process. Yeah. But consistency brings it forward. Sharing information, saying this is not going to hurt down the line. These are the things that, in a two-way relationship, allow for adjustment, allow for change of reference, and that's kind of something we have to look at, is how do we forge that strengthened relationship to understand.
Big part of what's the focus in the Bahamas is legitimately strengthening the systems to protect personal data and seeing how you can go further, taking advantage of modern technology so people can have even more control or sovereignty over their data. So I think that is also very, very important in terms of where we're headed. But for you, Aubry, when we think about the basic banking concept and how it's geared to getting more persons on board, how important is that for the Bahamas, and what do you think would be some of the critical success factors or indicators that we should be looking at?
I think it's essential. The Bahamas in the Caribbean has the largest level of wealth inequity, right? The most amount of distance between those that have and those that haven't. So I don't think, because we're so spread out, I don't think we really understand how critical it is and how many folks are struggling at that fundamental socioeconomic level. So finding a pathway in to be part of a more formal system is essential. It's essential to resisting external shocks like hurricanes, it's inflation, and any of the things that we struggle with that we can't necessarily control. If you're in a formal system, you have a better capacity to resist that, as well as to build your own foundation. Having banking entities that are sensitive to that create a pathway for you to build up your equity, creating resources that talk about savings and long-term planning instead of the short-term. These are all really essential and viable components. So you're starting the communication, the money smart, you're creating this access point into basic banking, but then now you're going to throw, how do you foster that? And that'll have to be done with a combination of all sectors, reinforcing that's a success point.
And how do you see potential entrepreneurial activity in the Family Islands responding?
So I think it comes down to the points that both of you had referenced. Is it's functional and it's crucial for us to move forward. So we did a study of the impact of both Dorian and then COVID on small businesses in Abaco and Grand Bahama, looking at what that meant to have to incur two major crises. And the obvious takeaway is that it affected all of them pervasively. But there was an indication that businesses that had started to foster about 3 years of success and had 3 or more staff on board were able to resist that. And so thinking about how we use and target this to critical businesses that could benefit from it, that's starting to show a staff base, that are serving communities that are maybe struggling with this, and being very strategic in who we partner with, I think starts to show wins that others can adopt. I think when we go in for large levels of everybody should get on board, our conditions and our environment and maybe our trust levels are probably not ideal for that. But starting to show where we see really powerful pilots and strategically using different partners to be able to grow that becomes a way that I think will start to show, wow, this does have merit, and we can come around this. So whether it be you're thinking about building agency banks or a particular franchise that has a community around it, they already have trust, and when you start to introduce new ideas in, they can be those vehicles that lend that trust to a new idea, where at a time when, as I said, people are maybe a little untrustful of large institutions, they become the focal point that can start to build and grow a new way of thinking.
Well, thank you. So final question I'll ask each of you to weigh in on this one is, what should our stakeholders, whether you're banks, businesses, nonprofits, governments, regulators, what should they be focused on or thinking about when we start to look at policies and initiatives to promote financial inclusion or to get increased adoption of the digital channels for services so that we get meaningful and lasting results? What should be our focus? And you can think about it just from your sub-stakeholder perspective. Perhaps, Ms. Maynard, you want to think about it from what is it that businesses should be thinking about?
So
ensure that these changes are lasting.
For businesses, I think that first we need to think of relevancy. We also need to make sure that we're meeting the need of our customer. And our customer, not just our external customer, but also our internal customer, because both have to play in that field. We also need to make sure that accessibility has to be convenient. I won't say easy, but convenient, right? And I think that we also need to make sure that it is also broken down in a way that every single person can understand it. So if I'm talking to a 80-year-old, if I'm talking to a 50-year-old, if I'm talking to a 10-year-old, if I'm talking to a 20-year-old, if even I'm talking to a 2-year-old, because 2-year-olds are pretty intelligent these days when it comes to this kind of stuff. But you want everybody to understand it, because everybody that understands it helps the other person to understand it. And because of our society in particular, our society is built on a hierarchical kind of way where it's family and community, and so we need to be able to make sure that we get enough people to understand it in a way that's going to make it relevant to them, so they can see their benefit in it. They have to be able to see that this is going to benefit me, it's going to benefit my team, it's going to benefit my family, it's going to benefit my organization, it's going to benefit my whatever I'm a part of, in order for us to be able to move forward in a way that's gonna we can take full advantage of it and see the benefit of it, and we can grow with it.
Thank you. And I'll ask you the same question, Mr. Archer.
So I think dialogues like this become extremely important. Ensuring that the public understands the general journey that we're on, because we are on a journey. This is a continuum. Where we are, these are things that will continue to evolve over time. You have the advent of AI. We're not totally sure how that's going to impact the way that we're living. There are a lot of things that will emerge in the upcoming years that will make this journey, creative and different in ways that we possibly would not have contemplated in the past. So I think having open, honest discussions around where we are, where we want to go, challenges that we have, those things become extremely important. And having stakeholders all at the table trying to solve for problems of inclusion, as an example, so that we are understanding the challenges that persons are having accessing the financial system, but also understanding the challenges that the financial institutions are having as well. Earlier in the discussion, and I really wanted to address this, and I want to make sure that I address it now, there was a discussion of fees, and whether or not cash transactions are actually cheaper than digital transactions. And I really want to dispel that myth, because we haven't properly priced cash transactions as an industry. Cash involves security at multiple levels, whether it's at the till, the vault, during transportation, even when the merchant collects that cash, there's security at that point as well. So cash is extremely costly. And I think when we did our own analysis around the cost of moving cash and keeping cash and storing cash, we are not recovering the costs of that service. So our goal is not necessarily to pass on a new fee to our clients, but what we're trying to do is to make sure that we're using the most convenient method of moving cash and moving payments. Because the reality is a deposit basically is me taking from my bank. So I take cash from my bank and I come and then give it to you. Then you take that cash and you deposit it to your bank. That's the whole chain that involves movement and security. That's very costly. We don't price that right now. When we do it electronically, that happens without having to have all of those stakeholders at the table. So, going to a digital and electronic solution in a way that includes everyone is extremely important, because the other thing is when we travel, a lot of businesses are no longer taking cash for the same reasons I just gave. So we need to make sure that our population are comfortable using digital and electronic tools, because when you travel or if you make international payments, the payments are not accepted in cash. So in short, I would say, we're on a journey. A lot of things will change over time, and I think ongoing discussions in ways that we support the entire economy, especially those that are more vulnerable, will be important to ensure that we get financial inclusion as we evolve our entire financial ecosystem.
Thank you. I'll have some more to say on the cash issue when I close, but for you, Mr. Aubry, what do you see as being the important focuses for stakeholders if we want to have lasting?
So I think it's committing to ongoing community level engagement, listening, two-way dialogues, investing in the realities of the challenge, as well as opening doors for opportunities for solutions. As I said, I think that there's a lot of brilliant minds in the Bahamas, and I think we're able to quickly fashion on what a solution might be, but in doing so, often that can exclude folks from being a part of or seeing their investment in that solution, and that responsibility that we talked about gets sometimes pushed off as I'm going to sit back and wait and see what happens, or go around the system because I trust more in my own capacity to be able to do that. So I think investing in that community that community level communication from all stages, and not just on the one-offs, but ongoingly, that you're part of understanding what the challenge is, what a solution might be, but you're also hearing how things have gone. What's the solution? What's the honest problem that we're struggling with, and how do we then mutually work towards that? Or what are successes we've achieved and be able to do that? Hearing numbers and real solid facts about something helps distinctly, right? Being able to measure that $1 million versus $1 million, what does that get you, is a pretty logical discussion that you could sit down with anybody, over a domino table and understand that's a challenge. What are we going to work on with that? So I think it's honest and transparent and candid discussion at a community level that will help us to continue to push forward at these levels of reforms that you're working on.
No, thank you very much. The education is definitely very important, and Ms. Maynard mentioned we're also focused on satisfying people's needs and keeping a focus on that. To your point, Mr. Archer, when you talk about cash, we don't acknowledge sufficiently, but the most cash-dependent part of our country and our economy are the Family Islands. So we need to appreciate a lot more what a great logistical cost and burden it is for them, and why sometimes some of the transformation that we target might be even more important for them than us in the capital. But I think that's important. But the other thing that I want to say in terms of closing is that the conversation has focused a lot on the individual. The individual is also the business owner, whether it's a corporation or a sole proprietorship. And a part of financial inclusion is also, it's another conversation, but it's how small businesses participate. And that's a conversation for another segment, and I think it is something that we definitely will look into. But I want to thank all of you for being on the podcast, the show today. It's certainly been a very, very rewarding an insightful conversation. I'm very glad that we had such a cross-sectional perspective, business, the organization for responsible governance from the governance side, and then we had the commercial banker in the hot seat. So thank you all very much. It has been a pleasure having you on Harbourside Chats today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let me say to our audience, thank you as always for joining us. Remember, Harbourside Chats with the Governor. We partner with ZNES Television, so you can catch these replay on ZNES as well as on our social media channel. You can also send us email at harboursidechats@centralbankbahamas.com if you have any suggestions on topics that we might cover in future shows. Again, it's a pleasure having you, and we look forward to many more of these stimulating and informative dialogue.